On this day, celebrating the United Nations and a focus on refugee, I've been asked to sort of be Exhibit A. I am a second-generation refugee. My mom and dad and grandparents left Russia in 1920 as a result of the Russian Revolution, and they happened to be on the losing side. So before the revolution, they were privileged and they had everything. And then they became emigres, which is another word for refugees or exiles, and they had nothing. So then one of the little incidents on the way to immigration was that my grandmother, my mom, and my aunt, Galina, in whose name I was named, became boat people. And they were put out on a Greek island, and there they suffered epidemics, and my aunt, who was 6 years old, died of scarlet fever. So these are some of the things that happened to refugees. Then they recouped in Yugoslavia, and my mom and dad eventually met, and I was the result. And then, you know, revolutions and wars have been the hallmark of the 20th century. So then when I was 3-year-old, we were bombed in our apartment house in Belgrade, which was still then Yugoslavia. We were bombed, but you know, I was 3 years old. I was held tight by my dad, and I didn't know what was going on. And the big memory was that we went somewhere and people opened their doors to us and we stayed with them, and it was a wonderful slumber party on the floor. So, well, then we were occupied by the Germans, and the big decision was, are we going to be liberated by the Soviet army, or are we going to be taken into forced labor camps by the Germans? Decisions. Since my dad was a white and my grandfather, you know, being liberated by the Soviets meant the Gulag. By the way, the rest of their families all ended up in the Gulag. And my paternal grandmother starved to death. So, details. All right. So then we stayed put and we were taken into a German forced labor camp. That we almost didn't make it, and I came down with TB, but then by the end of 45 we were liberated, and then we were going to be, that part of Germany was going to be handed over to the Soviets, so we ended up in the American zone. Then came the good times, 4 years in a displaced persons camp, and the connection to the UN. We were fed and clothed by the UNRWA, United Nations Refugee Organization. And I can tell you, the food was, you know, it was basically some kind of oat soup every day. But we were grateful for it. And then they brought us clothes from America. And we couldn't believe that people would discard such gorgeous garments. We just got them and sashayed in them like film stars. We loved it. My first orange was given to me by an American soldier. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know whether I was supposed to bite into it or peel it or what to do with it. They told me how to, and I remember biting into that. I mean, it's a memory that I will keep forever. Okay. One of the great things about being in this kind of situation is that they don't make you go to school. My grandmother, we had this one book in Russian, and I was in the hospital, and my mom and dad were reading. My grandmother was reading it to me. And I sort of knew it by heart. They kept reading the same book to me. And my mom said, enough already, show them the letters. And that's how I learned to read, you know, just knowing the book by heart. So I learned to read. But then we were in Germany, and we were in this displaced persons camps. And my mom said, you know, this kid has to go to school. And Well, the people were Ukrainians, Russians, Estonians, Latvians, Lithuanians, Poles. So my mom took one look at the school and said, I don't think she's going to learn anything here. Out you go to the German village, into the German school. Out of the whole camp, I was the only one to be made to go out into the German school. So I learned German. And then I, made it into the 6th grade. And then where do we go? We need to find a place to go. We can't go back to Russia. We can't go back to Yugoslavia. We can't stay in Germany. Okay, Canada. Canada didn't work out. Venezuela. Oh yeah, when Canada was the place, then, she has to learn English. Galina has to learn English. So my mom, always the enterprising, person, found me somebody who had been a professor of English back in Russia. So she sat me down, and I was beginning to crack the 3 little pigs. I was so proud. I was doing it, and then, no, Canada is not working out. We're going to Venezuela. No, Venezuela. We knew nobody, but nobody who knew Spanish. We didn't. So my mom said, I guess, it's not going to work out. And then, no, not Venezuela, Morocco. We're going to Morocco. Well, why? Because it was a French protectorate, and my dad, who came from this genteel background, was raised being fluent in French as well as in Russian. So there's one language, because I didn't know it. Well, we arrived in Morocco. So by that time, I'm 12 years old. I've had really 1 year of schooling in German. And of course, I don't know a word of French. And to get into the 6th grade, you had to do the dictée, and only 5 spelling errors. Well, it took me 2 years to get back into the 6th grade, which I had already been in 3 years before. So I'm finally making it into the 6th grade. And the reason I had such a hard time is that the teacher, against all expectations, was also calling out punctuation. So he would read a sentence and he would say, period, comma, and I write that, period, comma. Anyway, bye-bye, I made it in the French system, and but you see, revolution, war, occupation, well, we were in a colonially dominated country, and the Moroccans were not happy with the situation. It was the years of decolonizations, and the French were being kicked out. And we weren't French, and where do we go now? Well, of course, Australia. We went to Australia. All right, so here I am. I know Russian, I know Serbo-Croatian, I know German, I know French. I've had Greek and Latin. Do I know English? No, I don't know English. So anyway, we arrived in Australia, and it was hard now because I'm no longer a child, and I'm beginning to understand people telling me that that my name isn't, they want to shorten it or they want to change it. If I don't understand them, they speak louder, as if I were, deaf. Anyway, now I'm 20 years old, and I understand the discrimination, the hardship, the difficulty. Anyway, I just want to, to finish on the following note. If you survive, of course, many don't survive this kind of situation. If you survive, it makes you incredibly resilient. You survive a little thing here and there, and you say, oh, if I can make it through this, I can make it through these other things. So, that's why the immigrants in this country work so hard and do all the things that need to be done to make it. I'm not wishing being a refugee or an exile or an immigrant on anybody, but we here live such a privileged life. We get scared by everything. We're very easily subjected to fear. Let's get out there and do what has to be done and not be afraid. Sorry, I hope I didn't overstay my time. Maybe I had. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to start out with a poem adapted from Ruth Cox that addresses our theme for today. Cross the border. Cross the border? Real or imagined? It's just a drawn line. Imagine. Imagine a line drawn between you and the nearest grocery store. Imagine. Imagine that you just ate a slice of bread and you hunger for more. Imagine. Imagine the shelves of food in that grocery store upon which your starving belly could dine. Imagine. Imagine that all you would have to do to cross the border is to crawl across that drawn line. Imagine. Imagine that you are the one whose job it is to shoot anyone who dares to cross that borderline drawn in front of you. Imagine. Imagine that it is you who chooses to feed or to kill the hungry. And then ask yourself, what would I do? Real or imagined? It's just a drawn line. Cross the border. As you entered the sanctuary this morning, you crossed many borders. Maybe you were confused, maybe you were surprised, maybe you thought it was a party. Maybe you wondered where you belonged. The musician Carlos Santana said, one day there will be no borders, no boundaries, no flags, no countries, and the only passport will be the heart. This is a truly nice sentiment, but for now, we face the reality of the nation state with its insistence on formal borders and formal ways to cross them. Visas, passports, fingerprint cards, you always have to have them with you. But the migrants of the world cannot always follow these rules. Later, we'll review some of the mechanisms established by the world community after the horrors of World War II that resulted in the UN establishing the conventions that try to deal with the reality of migration and the massive human rights issues generated by migration and discrimination, breaking the barriers of race and immigration. A few minutes ago, we read the preamble to the United Nations. 3 years after its founding, the members of the UN adopted the Declaration of Human Rights. Eleanor Roosevelt chaired the Commission on Human Rights that drafted the Declaration. The Declaration's preamble starts with these words: whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Doesn't that sound lovingly familiar? The Declaration has served as the basis for UN conventions drafted in the decades after its adoption. Eleanor Roosevelt herself commented on the Declaration as follows. She said, "It may well become the international Magna Carta of men everywhere." Remember, she spoke these words in the 1940s, a very different era. With the Declaration as their guiding force, members of the UN were able to draft conventions on the status of migrants. The world has changed markedly in 60 plus years, but the importance of the principles has not diminished. That is why we believe it's so important to continue to focus on the relevance of these ideals today in our globalized world, breaking the barriers of race and immigration. But first, why did I get involved with the UU-UN? And why did I become a UU-UN envoy? See my little sign over here. Many of you know about my own career as a Foreign Service officer. When I was assigned to the U.S. Embassy in Bern, Switzerland, I also had the wonderful opportunity to work occasionally in the U.S. mission in the UN office in Geneva. It's the biggest presence of the UN outside of New York. There I helped arrange media coverage of the U.S. role in major international conferences on ending the war in Yugoslavia and furthering the Middle East peace process. I greatly valued our nation's participation in these high-level meetings in which we implemented the tools of diplomacy. While at the UU General Assembly, the GA as we call it, in Phoenix in June this year, I headed to the UU UN booth in the exhibition hall and realized my passion for international affairs ideally meshed with my devotion to UU principles. I went to the table, gathered some materials for review with the idea sooner or later I'll get involved with this UUUN. Then along came Bibiana van der Heiden, who fast-forwarded my involvement by inviting me to join her in planning UU UN Sunday. I'll invite Bibi to tell her story.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Bibiana van der Heiden, and I am a youth envoy of the Unitarian Universalist United Nations Office for Mountain Vista UU. When I became a youth envoy, I did not really know what that was because our congregation has never had one before. I also did not know very much about the United Nations, and I certainly did not know that there was a UU office there. I have already learned a lot about it. The UN started right after World War II in late October 1945, with 51 countries that wanted to prevent another big war in the world. At that time, the goal was to work for peace. Now there are 193 member countries, which is almost all the countries in the world. Over time, the work of the UN has spread to many other issues in the world. The United Nations Day is celebrated once a year in October. A year after the UUA was founded, in 1961, Unitarian Universalists started their own office there at the UN. Just a few days ago, they celebrated the 50th anniversary of this office. It has been and continues to be our voice at the UN. This is why the UU-UNO would like to have at least one envoy in all congregations. There are youth envoys and adult envoys. Peter and I both decided to become an envoy without knowing about each other. So we are now a team. We are going to keep you informed about what the UU-UNO is working on. We also want you to talk with us if there are any issues you want the UN to work on. And then they will start talking with the representatives of each member country. This is how things start happening at the UN. For example, this is how the UN Women was founded. The organization, for example, the organization that works on women's rights and greater equalities, gender equalities. I really like the UN because their work is so much like our work. We have our 7 UU principles. They have the UN Charter, which covers pretty much the same values our principles do. They work on gender equality, LGBTQ issues, racial equality, helping refugees, peacemaking, children's rights, and many more issues. We at Mountain Vista work on these issues here in our own community. And the UUA works on these issues in our whole country. The UN works more internationally. That is why I believe we should all support the UN. We can do so through our very own UU-UNO. The UU-UNO always needs more funds to function well. The office is completely dependent on donations. Peter and I will take donations out on our table after the service. If you feel like helping out and learning more about the UU, UNO, come see us at our table. You can also find out how to become a Blue Ribbon congregation.
Thank you, Bibi. Each year, the UU office in the UN building that Bibi just described chooses a theme to address in their International Spring Seminar. This year, the 2012 statement also corresponds to the 2012 Unitarian Universalist Justice General Assembly in Phoenix. Similar themes. Some of the key themes that emerged from the spring seminar include build a society where people are accepted regardless of race, gender, or immigration status by breaking down the barriers that divide us. Remain accepting and affirming to the differences in others and live up to our first UU principle. Promoting and affirming the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Reject discrimination as a social norm. Advocate for the revision of nations' immigration laws to become more humane. Support the implementation of less costly and more efficient methods to obtain legal status. Encourage our communities to actively support and ensure the passage of the full DREAM Act and other related legislation. The deferred action is a right step that was taken a few months ago, is a step in the right direction. Stand in solidarity with every member of our human family, lending our voice, energy, and privilege to raise up our brothers and sisters experiencing discrimination. Unite to overcome all divisive issues and teach our home communities that we are not severed ethnicities, but one human race. Breaking the barriers of race and immigration. You'll see that similar statements resulting actions took place at the GA this year. Those of you who were there know exactly what I mean. And it will continue to receive the attention of the UU-UN office, what Bibi mentioned earlier. Two important conventions drafted by the UN are part of the agenda of this office in New York, of the UU-UN office, located physically in the UN building, for those of you who have been there. The UN Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Their Families. This convention imposes a series of obligations on governments to promote, quote, sound, equitable, humane, and lawful conditions, unquote, for the international migration of workers and members of their families. This convention entered into force in 2003, 9 years ago, with 40 nations that have so far ratified this convention. No migrant receiving state, that means countries where migrants tend to go to, have in Western Europe or North America, including the US, has ratified this convention. Neither have Australia, South Africa, or India. The second document I'd like to highlight is the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, CERD as they call it. CERD commits its members to the elimination of racial discrimination and the promotion of understanding among all races. The convention also requires its parties to outlaw hate speech and criminalize membership in racist organizations. The draft was completed by mid-1964, was finally adopted in December 65, and entered into force 4 years later in 69. As of October 2011, it has 86 signatories, including the United States. As Unitarian Universalists, we need to stand up for human rights and demand better of our leaders. Both of these conventions ask for racial minorities and migrants, two already marginalized groups, to be treated with dignity and respect that they deserve. These conventions demand an end to discrimination. They echo our Unitarian Universalist principles by highlighting the importance of treating all people as equals under the law. Let us together help break the barriers of race and immigration.